All right, everyone. It is 5:30. I'll go ahead and call this policy meeting to order. Ms. Shope, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Spencer Anderson,
Present.
Greg Schneider,
Present.
and Amy Levy.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you so much. So before we approve the agenda, I'm going to recommend some adjustments. If we could remove policy 342 and policy 342 or 342.9 Rule 1. And then Dr. Garrison, once I complete, I'll yield the floor and he'll explain the reason for the removal of those. The following policies are uploaded, but technically they're not listed as items on the agenda. And as many of you are aware, we review policies as a set. So if we could add the following policies to the agenda to go with what is already listed. And Ms. Shope, don't worry, I have a full list with the adjustments that we'll go over before we approve the agenda. So policy 811 is uploaded but is not listed on the agenda. So we need to do that in case we need to make an edit. Also policy 362, policy 362.1, and 362.2. Again, all of those are uploaded but are not individually listed on the agenda. And again, the reason that needs to happen is if we make a change to anything that's currently listed that impacts the other policies in that group, we just want to make sure that everything is coherent. So Ms. Shope, the final list for number 3 should read A, policy 811, B, policy 811.1. We'll go ahead and remove, as I said, the current B and C, so that makes C policy 761. D is policy 362. E is policy 362 Rule 1. F, policy 362.1. G, policy 362.2. And then just to be consistent, if we could go ahead and split the current F, so H would be policy 871, and I would be policy 871 Rule 1. Ms. Shope, do you need me to repeat anything? Okay. Any questions from anyone on the committee? The other item that I just wanted to briefly address is the current header for number 3 is policies for first reading. And Dr. Garrison, thank you for pointing this out. I've probably been looking at this for the past year and a half and it hasn't registered. But since policies in the committee don't have a set number of times that they're reviewed, we kind of hold on to them until they're ready to go to the full board. And then once they go to the full board, there's intentionality around having a first reading, and then we take a break and we have that second reading at the following meeting. If we could just change, if committee members are okay, header number 3 to just read, and from this point moving forward, policies for review. I think that would be more accurate. Do any committee members have an issue with that change? No? Okay. All right. Please let me know if you need me to repeat anything. If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. For the policy minutes, I just have a couple edits before we have a motion to approve. Bear with me, I need to scroll really quickly. Under number 2, policies for first read, that third section down, it has capital I, capital T, which could be construed with IT department. If we could just have that say it, so a lowercase t there. And then if we jump down to where it says Chair Levy indicated that due to time and another meeting, if we could just add the remainder of the policy meeting agenda, and then those items that were postponed until this meeting are listed there. Are there any issues with those adjustments? Ms. Shope, do you need me to repeat any of that?
Just the tail end of where you were saying the remainder of the policies.
Yeah, that sentence, so it should read, Chair Levy indicated that due to time and another meeting, the remainder of the policy meeting agenda is being postponed. Yeah. All right, are there any other edits to the minutes from our December 7th meeting? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the minutes from the December 7th meeting? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, aye. That motion passes unanimously. Dr. Garrison, forgive me. I got caught up with the approval of the agenda and the minutes. I will yield the floor so you can explain why we're removing 342.9 and 342.9 Rule 1.
Sure, and I'll also ask Mrs. Mortek to start that conversation. Ms. Mortek.
Good evening. We decided to pull that just because in looking at it originally, it's from, I think it's 2001, so it just really needs to be updated. But in looking at our work streams, it's something that we feel like right now isn't a priority, and we can come back and address it at a later time when we have, we want to look down the road and have opportunities. So we appreciate that.
Additionally, I think the charter school conversation is something that we'll probably, again, revisit at a later time. However, there's also some themes that's in the current state statutes that we want to get additional clarification around. We were able to get some clarification at the state level, but just not enough to, make some really big decisions as it pertains to how we want to move forward with a charter school opportunity, virtual charter school opportunity here in the school district. And so that's the overall reasons why we want to pull this policy conversation at the current time.
Sounds good, and thank you for providing that context. All right, so that brings us to 2A, public comment on parent guardian advocate policy. This is a new policy. We have 60 minutes allotted for public hearing concerning this policy. So this is how we'll handle that time. First, I'll read our norms for public comment, same as we use in our regular board meetings, and then ask if we have anyone in the room interested in addressing the committee. I will then ask for any submitted emails to be read to the committee if applicable. And then if we conclude both of those items before the 60 minutes expire, we will continue with the meeting, but we will pause at any point if someone arrives that wishes to speak to the advocate policy. Does that sound okay with our committee members? Dr. Garrison, you okay with that format?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
No problem.
All right, our norms for public comment. Members of the public are welcome to attend all open meetings of the Board of Education. Individuals attending board meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful and courteous manner that models appropriate behavior for our students. Individuals wishing to comment are expected to comply with the following norms in order to maintain a respectful and orderly meeting and to prevent discussion of confidential material in a public forum. Comments should be directed to members of the Board of Education and not district employees, students or other members of the public in attendance at the meeting. Speech that is belligerent, disorderly, disruptive, repetitive, or exceeds the allowable time permitted for each speaker is prohibited. Concerns or questions that entail the disclosure of identifying information regarding specific students are prohibited. Response from the board, if any, will be limited clarification concerning inaccurate information, seeking additional information from the speaker, or acknowledging that the speaker has been understood. The Board of Education will not debate any individual, and the board will not take action on an item raised during public comment that is not on the meeting noticed agenda. The chair will interrupt and rule an individual who violates any of these norms out of order. If ruled out of order by the chair, the individual's opportunity to address the board will end immediately and the microphone will be turned off. So before we begin, I just want to thank the administration for getting the word out about this opportunity. I am comfortable when speaking for this committee is that we welcome public input because that's how we get better, that's how we make better decisions. I'm really excited that this policy is before us. So I have talked long enough. Ms. Shope, is there anyone in the room that's registered to give public comment on policy 811.1, parent guardian advocate?
Yes, I have one person.
Okay.
David Ramirez.
Okay. And as Mr. Ramirez comes to the mic, please go ahead and press that button so the red light comes on so we can hear you and it can be recorded accurately. If anyone else in the room, if you want to speak to this policy, we definitely want to hear from you. Just fill out the card with Ms. Shope and we'll take you in the order that you register.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Ramirez. I reside at 556 Highland Avenue in the beautiful city of Beloit, Wisconsin. This policy is important to me because last year, before the school year was over with, there was 2 different incidents where I tried to be an advocate after being called by a parent to be an advocate, and the parent was told there was no possibility for me to be their advocate. The first time top administration went to the Brother Dutton. They went to go talk to the Even Start family, and they went to go tell them that the Even Start program was being taken away from that facility and taken to the mayoral community. Even Start is a beautiful program. I believe that there's a lot of good things about it. It should be in all the younger age classes and schools that we have. But to be able to just take it away from the community at Brother Dutton and say we're moving it, to me that was out of pocket and somebody had to step up and say something. There was a parent that told me to come by. The first visit that they had at Brother Dutton, they took upper administration. They had interpreters, but the conversation was pretty much, it's over and said, it's done with, it's moving. You guys have no implement in any of this. The second time that I was there because administration went again. They didn't take any bilinguals, any translators. There was nobody there. One of the parents from there called me and said, hey, they don't have any bilingual interpreters. Can you come please be our advocate for this? When I got to the building, the superintendent, Dan Kaiser, and Teresa Moratek were there. They both told me that I couldn't be there. The superintendent actually got in the doorway and told me that I couldn't be there. That was my first time being denied this. The second time, it was a parent from Cunningham who had some issues with their kid. There was a video going around. There was threats. There was police contact. There was all types of different things going on. The parent didn't understand really the processes with all this. She asked me to be her advocate. Tony Bosco told the parent that I couldn't be her advocate. She had to find somebody else. So by the time that the meeting was already set, it was about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon before the school was over. I called Tony Bosco and I asked him why I couldn't be an advocate. He didn't want to have the conversation with me, so I came here to the Collex Center. When I was here, Tony Bosco told the parent that she had to go find somebody else other than myself to be her advocate. To me, it's sad that as of to right now, we still haven't had a policy saying what an advocate looks like, what that responsibility is, how they come about being an advocate. And to me, this policy is important because as a community, we need it. To me, upper administration took all this into their hands and was able to do whatever they wanted to be able to just dismiss me and the parents. And there was no policy or procedure in place to say that they were wrong. So what happened and what they did, they got away with because there was no policy. So with this policy being in place, at least the community can say that if the administration goes about it again the same way, they're in the wrong because now there is a policy. So that's my place here. I'm for this policy because I do believe that it's something that the community has needed for too long of a time now. Other than that, everything that's down in the policy is pretty simple. It's really straightforward. I don't have anything against the way it's written right now. I actually like it. It's simple and basic, and it tells you exactly what it is. It tells you how it's going to go, how the meeting is done, and who has the right to say this conversation is over with because you guys went out of pocket with the conversation. It's no longer leading in the same topic. So everything the way it's done, I agree with it. It's just I wanted to make sure that there was a backstory to all this because a lot of the time, this won't be a learning experience if nobody knows that backstory to it. So that was my whole intent with all this, for somebody to take action and do something about it, and that's why I'm here, because this is important to me.
Thank you so much. Could you turn that off before you hit? Thank you, sir. And just thank you for providing the context. just so everyone in the room is aware, once the policy is approved and goes to the full board, as we discussed previously, that's when your first and second readings happen. So the board, the regular board meeting, which is everyone on the board, not just the committee members, meet on the first and third Tuesday of the month. So at the first Tuesday meeting, that'll be a first reading. You can come during public comment if there are additional things or additional people that want to weigh in. And then at the following meeting on the third Thursday, there will be that opportunity during public comment as well. It'll appear on the second reading, which is when final approval will happen and the policy will become active. So just wanted to provide that context. Ms. Shope, anyone else in the room who's interested in sharing? Did we receive any emails?
Yes.
Okay, please read those.
I have an email from Terrell Yarbrough. He says, "Good morning. Thank you for asking for community feedback. The invitation to attend a meeting was nice. Although I'm not attending in person, I feel this is a powerful way to build support and a sense of collaboration that is appreciated, at least by myself. In response to the actual policy, I believe that it is well constructed and easy to understand. See my points below. Point 1, it clearly states the reason behind the policy. The next point, the language gives the family autonomy in choosing their advocate. This empowerment is critical. The next point, it is important for administration to set the structure of the meeting while also accepting feedback. This builds trust. The next point, I also liked how it was written into the policy the reasons why a meeting would end based on taking a path that isn't in the best interest of the child and/or agenda. If you need further clarification, please let me know. I can be contacted by email or by my cell phone number at," and he gives his cell phone number. "Best of luck with tonight's meeting."
Perfect. Were there any other emails received?
No.
All right. Okay, so as is our practice, we will review the policies as a group. So we will begin with policy 811, and then we'll go into policy 811.1 before any motions are asked for. All right, policy 811, committee member Schneider, do you have any additions, changes, edits?
I do not.
Okay, committee member Anderson, same question.
I do not.
All right, I just have one small tweak for 811, and I'm pretty thick-skinned, so let me know, committee members, if I'm overthinking this. In that second sentence, okay, so let me just read it because it's brief, in case everyone isn't looking at it. It says, as a commitment to continuous improvement, the Board of Education and the staff welcome suggestions from individuals and community groups. However, the Board of Education and staff shall make decisions based on their own best judgment and interest of the district. The however, for me, kind of undoes it. It's kind of like a but in the sentence. I like to have the language of ultimately. For me, that feels like we're going to take all of the input into consideration, but ultimately this is where the decision lies. Am I overthinking it? Does anyone have any feedback on changing however to ultimately?
I like that change.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, any suggestions?
I'm fine with the changes.
Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Shope, could we change however to ultimately? Yes. All right. So that brings us to policy 811.1. Board Member Schneider, any edits, any additional edits? We did look at this at our December 7th meeting.
The only, the question that I had is the second bullet point is also stated in the third bullet point. Do we need to have it in both places? Or can we eliminate the second one? The administration will set the agenda with input from the parent. The third bullet, it says, all parties must follow the agenda or facilitation of the meeting. Administration sets the agenda but welcomes feedback from all parties.
Oh, Dr. Garrison, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do understand what you're hinting at. I think for clarity, I like the way that it does read. I did put some thought into that, Mr. Snyder. To me, it does separate a little bit when you start talking about the interruptions, and so I do like the way it's read.
And I'm actually, I'm sorry, Board Member Anderson, any adjustments to policy 811.1?
No.
Okay. I'm actually fine with it. The only thing, kind of like my other correction or suggestion for the second bullet point, administration sets the agenda. I would like it to say, but welcomes input from all parties. For me, feedback happens after the fact. Like that thing that just happened, let me know how you think about that. But input, I think, is more proactive. It can happen throughout the process, not just at the end. And I think that's what's going to be most helpful for all involved. So are there any issues with changing feedback to input?
No.
Okay, and then other than that, hearing Dr. Garrison's recommendation, Board Member Schneider, are you okay with it as it reads?
I am okay with it as it reads.
Okay. All right, look at that. So we have reviewed policy 811 and 811.1. If there are no additional comments or changes, is there a motion to approve both of those policies to move on for first reading at the full board?
So moved.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, those policies pass unanimously. And I'm just going to put this out here. Feel free to email the committee or let us know later. But I know when we met at the December 7th meeting, there was policy. Well, my question was, because this speaks to parents and guardians, what if we had an employee that wanted to have an advocate present at any district proceedings? And there was a discussion to potentially develop an 811.2 policy, because from the administration, they didn't want to include both of those perspectives in the same policy. If not, it's fine. But do we have any updates on when we may see 811.2?
So technically, teachers can always have an advocate in the room, or I'll just say advocate, or a board, a BDA representative if needed. They can always have those in the room, and so I'm kind of confused as it pertains to why a separate policy is needed.
Oh, I was just going off of the discussion that happened December 7th. So I just wanted to follow up on that discussion. If you don't feel like a separate policy is needed, if you could just reference the language that you're referring to in current policy, I think it would be a great idea to cross-reference that. And if that happens, what I would request is that when it shows up for the full board for a first reading, if someone from the administration could just highlight that change so it doesn't fall through the crack. And just kind of reference this meeting and say, instead of developing 811.2, as was discussed, we're just going to cross-reference this policy and include it on 811.1. All right.
I don't know if it's a policy though. It's mostly handled through HR. So technically, let's say there's a situation with a teacher needs to meet with an administrator. If the teacher wants an advocate to be in a room, they can have one. So I'm not sure if that's a policy more so than it is just
A practice?
Practice, yeah.
Okay. And we can take that offline because technically it's not listed as an item because it doesn't exist yet, but it does go along with this policy. So if we could just put a pin in that and kind of explore that further. If it's not in policy, I would love to see that at least in admin regs, just so there's full transparency and employees are aware. It's explicit of what their rights are. So no one who needs that information misses it. All right, thank you everyone for your patience with that one. Next on the agenda is policy 761. The PowerPoint presentation is again attached, and thank you so much for walking us through that presentation in our December 7th meeting. And thank you all for being present. Dr. Garrison, let me know how you want to move forward with this one. I know that the adjustments that we discussed at our December 7th meeting, I kind of have our stop point noted of how far we got because we ended a little bit early at that meeting. But there were some structural changes that needed to happen. There was the discussion that was had about staffing implications, and staffing is probably the wrong word, number of participant implications to kind of fulfill the policy. For example, as the policy currently reads, there is a board level committee And then each building has a committee, and then each building committee has a representative that serves on the district level committee. And one of the questions that we explored at our December 7th meeting was all that personnel to fulfill the policy really necessary? And so I just want to hear feedback from you all, since you are present, of are there additional changes that you would like to recommend?
So let me just start off with saying again, thank you for bringing note to that. So typically in the wellness committees, and again, anyone can chime in on this. Typically in the wellness committee, there is a board level. I say board level. There is a district level committee. That district level committee is made up of building level representatives. Okay, and every building also has a team of folk that they work with as well. You can call them a committee as well. And so I think that setup is appropriate, unless we would just have a district level committee and then we put it out to everybody who may have one or not. I think this is the correct setup for a wellness team, to have a district level committee. The district level committees are made up of building representatives, and those building representatives also have a team at their building level to help them do the work that we're trying to move forward at the district level and or their own building level. And so I do think that setup is appropriate as it's stated. Now, any feedback from the wellness screen?
Good evening. Thank you for letting me address the question. I'm Jill Camber-Davidson from the Rock County Public Health Department, working with the department here in terms of their wellness type things. And wellness committee structure in Wisconsin is really not defined as a real example model kind of stuff. You do need that district level committee. And then you need to have representatives on that district level committee from the buildings, from the community, students, things like that. But how a district wants to do that is up to them. The school health council model, or the SHAC model, is something that has been put into place by many other states and found great success in the fact that you have someone appointed from each school building that then reports what's happening to the full district level. And makes it so nice going forward, because then the message comes back down to the districts. The districts can then look at, or the school buildings, I'm sorry. The message comes from the district to the buildings. The buildings get the message, they know what's happening, and they also then have someone who can bring information forward for employee wellness, for example, or for different things that are happening for the students. And the reps can work together, especially elementary level. If they want to do some special project type things, it is really nice to have those people that work together. But ultimately, it comes down to the decision of what the district thinks is best for their students and their staff.
All right, thank you for that input. Board Member Levy, I personally think that that's a good setup. However, this is a board level conversation, so I'm open for feedback.
No, I'm completely fine. If your recommendation is that we have a district level committee, each building has a committee, each building also has a representative that serves on the district level committee, if that's the direction you want to go in, I'm completely fine with. But the other thing that we discussed at the 12/7 meeting is addendum implications, because in that meeting, we also identified that this was a 10-month commitment. And my assumption is that if we're going to engage all these people, we expect that they're going to be active in the work of implementing the wellness policy. I can't see doing that without offering an addendum. And that doesn't necessarily need to be spelled out in policy, but it does have implications for our addendum scheduling. So I just wanted to know, has thought been given to that?
So I'll be honest with you, I have given it a lot of thought. One of the things that I'm also having to consider is our current budget conversations and how that actually looks as well from a, just a budgetary conversation. And so As we have more budget conversations throughout our school year, especially having our budget conversations at the board level, if there are funds that we could possibly, set aside for this opportunity, mostly, and like I shared last time, these are typically volunteer opportunities at the building level and at the district level. From a leadership perspective, this also provides teachers the opportunity to say, here's a leadership opportunity for me that I can actually add to my SLO, my PPG, from a more of I'm trying to grow myself capacity. And so if there are additional funds, I would be willing to explore, but right as it stands right now, I can't commit to an additional line item for budgetary pieces. I don't know what that actually number could be right now. I don't know that number.
Okay. So let's dig into the policy. Board Member Schneider, and we'll take it one page at a time. Any edits to that first page?
No.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, same question. All right, we'll move on to the second page. Board Member Schneider.
Let me look at my notes.
Board Member Levy, can I just interject real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please. And just going back to the committee level, I know it sounds like it's a lot, but I want to make sure it's clearly defined. The district level committee will be made up of various people, not just teachers. You see what I'm saying? And so it's going to be made up of community members, it could be made up of parents, it could be made up of teachers. Of course, it's various members in that community. At the building level, yes, we will need teacher representation. However, I've seen some wellness committees who operate with volunteers as well, parent volunteers who come in. Sometimes there's community partners who come in that works with the wellness teams, wellness within a building, within the community. Regardless, everyone from every building would need some form of representation at our district level. And so at the most we can have, at the least we can have at least 13 people, 13 schools, X, Y, and Z. Or we can have as many as, 20 people that could participate on this district level team. As long as we're able to show that every building has a representative speaking on behalf of wellness in their building, I think that's duly noted. So I don't want it to sound like it's just teachers that could participate in that, because it could be a parent who really wants to participate in wellness at their student's school, which is perfectly okay. And they run the activities, they work with us at the district level to get that work done as well. And so I just want to make sure I put that into the conversation, because I don't want to make it seem like it has to be just a teacher.
No, and that's actually outlined in the policy. They give a list, business partners, parents, counselors,
Correct. On
health
page 4.
education. Yep, so that is definitely outlined in the policy. Board Member Anderson, I don't remember if I asked you if you had any edits for that second page. Okay. I just have a couple questions, and before we kind of dig in, I want to, let me start with a structural issue, because that'll run throughout the policy. Dr. Garrison, is it the intention of the administration to leave the policy as is, or would you like for the policy to be more of a framework and some of the robust details that are in the policy be left for administrative regulations? And the reason I ask that is because our schools, as they should, have different vibes, different experiences within the building. So one building may take this wellness policy and this is their adaptation. It may look different in another building. So I don't want it to be, I want us to provide a framework, but I don't want it to be overly prescribed so people feel like they don't have the flexibility to do what works for their building, their students, their families, et cetera. Does that make sense?
So the way I look, so yes and, I can say yes and no.
That's fine.
Yes and no, because when I look at this policy, it clearly delineates every opportunity that a school could have. And if I was to narrow it down to a framework, just me thinking here, and again, committee, if you want to join and change, add to the thought, that's perfectly okay. If I was to narrow it down to the framework, I don't want people just to use the framework and not necessarily revert back to these guidelines that's clearly delineated. So that's my first thought, Board Member Levy.
Okay.
So that's first thought.
Do you have additional thoughts?
Well, I want to. Can you give me more information as it pertains to what framework you're referring to, or because if it was a framework that you were specifically wanting to see, I would love to take a look at it and kind of compare what we. I'm just I don't know what type of framework you were referring to.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is there's a lot of robust detail that's outlined in this policy that we've all reviewed. Now, if that is in policy, that means every building that has a committee, that what is outlined in policy, that is the expectation for your building. Whether you have a little input, you have a lot of input, you have big committee, little committee, whatever, these are the expectations for all. So what I was offering is if we have a wellness framework, these are the keystones that we agree to, and then you implement that in integrity, of course, but in your building in a way that makes sense for your specific community, for your students, for your parents. Things happen differently in different buildings, but we all have set standards that we want to meet. So hopefully that makes sense, and I think that's a great thing. I think it's wonderful to have a building identity that's positive and inclusive, but if you are fine with moving forward and having more of a bulky policy that all committees in every building, this is your target, instead of having a more specialized target from building to building, I was just offering it as a suggestion, but I'm completely fine with that. Hopefully that provides more clarity.
So can we add board committee to the thought? Maybe can we add something that states like please note that every building, like can we add a phrase to the end of this to kind of capture that?
Not if everything's listed in policy. If everything's listed in policy, then that's the expectation for each building. If we have a framework in policy and we flesh it out, when by we, I mean the administration, fleshes out the kind of a la carte in admin regs, then buildings will have the flexibility to pick and choose, again, with fidelity to the spirit of the policy, what works best for that building. So that's why I was making that offering. Let's do this. Yep, go ahead.
Did y'all have any thoughts to that at all?
And the team that, Phil, I am very collaborative, so feel free to just walk up to that mic, and that's going to be my cue to pause and yield the floor, because I don't want you to feel like you're here for no reason. You're here, and we value your input, so please do chime in. All right, so we will move forward, and feel free again to provide that input as we continue. What I would like to do, I think it's going to be really crucial to see an admin reg for this policy, so the policy doesn't get lost in translation and it's being implemented the way it's intended to. So a few things that I highlighted that I'll just go through as we go page by page. And Ms. Shope, as we tend to do, kind of keep a to-do list or a running list, these are just my recommendations of what I think would be important to have in administrative regs, lift it from the policy, just kind of a, Greg, what's the word I'm looking for? The Cliff Notes version of the policy. Although I hope everyone's committed to reading and digesting policy as is, but at any rate. Right under those 7 items, The first thing that I highlighted is the committee shall meet at least 3 times during the school year to discuss the implementation of established activities and address any barriers or challenges. So if we could note that on our kind of Cliff Notes list, so that when these SHAC committees are established at schools, they'll just kind of have a checklist of expectations derived directly from the policy. If we go down a little further, in addition, the committee shall meet annually to review the nutrition and physical activity policies, develop an action plan for the coming year, and prepare a report on policy implementation. It says for the Board of Education, but if it is a report on policy implementation, that should first come to the policy committee and then go to the full board.
I just want to make sure I'm where you are.
Okay, so on that second page, right under number 7, that second line, the committee shall meet at least 3 times. That was the first thing we want to put on the list. And then the next sentence, the committee shall meet annually to review the nutrition and physical activities policies, develop an action plan. And when we discussed on December 7th, those action plans, the decision was made, the administration had recommended that those happen in May. So if we could specify that as well. So develop an action plan, if we just want to put parentheses, in May of each year. I'm not committed to the wording, but that's the next action that should be on the checklist for the SHAC. Ms. Shope, does that make sense?
So this is all new language I'm adding to the policy, or this is stuff going into administrative regs, or these are just notes to discuss next time?
So they are notes that are recommendations for admin regs. So far we have 2 on the list. The only thing that's a change to the policy is that, as we discussed in December, because it says develop action plans, the specific target for when those action plans would be developed was May.
Okay, and where am I adding that language?
On that second page, I think that's like the 3rd or 4th line, where it says develop action plans.
What section are you reading from? Specific title, like section title at the top.
Wellness policy leadership.
Thank you.
Yep. And then the only other addition, to prepare a report on policy implementation for the Board of Education. If it's about policy implementation, that should come to the policy committee first. And then the next item on the checklist, the last sentence of that, at a minimum, the wellness policy will be reviewed and updated at least triennially by the Board of Education. And we should include policy committee as well. That's just our standard practice. Any policy will be reviewed first by the policy committee and then move on to the full board. So if we could just be explicit about that.
So we want to say at a minimum, the wellness policy will be reviewed and updated at least three times, or triennially, by the district and Board of Education?
So policy is always updated by the policy committee, and then it goes to the full board for approval. And of course, anyone on the full board that has any issues or wants to make any adjustments, it usually shows up on the consent agenda for, again, first and second reading. Sure. And let's say Board President Levy has an issue with it, he can always, or any board member can ask that it be pulled, the adjustments be made. But our practice is a policy edit goes to the policy committee, and then it goes to the full board. And then my question there, just to make sure that we're congruent with the policy.
Do we need it 3 times to do that? I'm just asking.
I'm just working with the policy that was submitted.
Yeah, I don't know if we need triennially. I'm sorry.
And that's every 3 years, not 3 times a year. Correct. So my question, and then I'm going to yield the floor, It says in the policy that it's going to be reviewed annually, but then we say that it's going to be reviewed and updated triannually. So it's going to come through policy and then go to the board. So this is what I was speaking about in the beginning, if we wanted to take a look at this offline before the policy committee delved into it. Because in the same line, we're saying that the board's gonna review it annually, but then we're gonna edit it and review it and adjust it triannually. So there's just some redundancies in the policy that I was hopeful would have been fleshed out before it came to the committee. Go ahead.
Okay, just to clarify, the Wellness Committee is meeting 3 times during the school year, and that's a piece in there. And then we're talking about the Wellness Committee annually reviewing the policy. And they make the report to the policy committee. But then when we get down about the triannual piece, we're looking for the board to have a review, or the policy committee to review at least once every 3 years. So when we can actually scratch that updated, so just so we have it goes through and it is looked at and reviewed at least triennially, so that when the state triennial inspection and update occurs, we can look and say that, yes, our policy has been updated since the last time the state was in doing their audit. So that's part of the reason for the language there.
So here's my only concern. If something comes to review for the policy committee, it's automatically going to go on to the full board. And this policy is requesting that that happens annually. And then it's also requesting that it happens triannually, so once every 3 years. So if we could pick one of those, I would think that that is sufficient, unless there is a different intent from those who develop the policy.
So then the piece that says annually can be scratched and just keep it at triennial.
I could do either or, so I want to lean on the expertise of those that crafted the policy. What was the intention behind it? Is it that it will be reviewed every year or at least once every 3 years?
Yeah, the intent is formal review every 3 years, and the committee, we'd like to see them review it every year, but that doesn't need to be in policy, because that will be driven by Dawn.
So here's the thing, if it's not in policy, it's not going to happen annually. Is your recommendation every year or at least once every 3 years?
At least once every 3 years.
Okay, so
So we change it to once every 3. I mean, that'll be, I support that, because that was my first. I think what we have here is, again, the standard from the state, and then we want to be better than the state, so we said annually, which again adds to what your thoughts.
But
were.
here's my concern, we said both in the policy.
Yes.
And so I'm just gonna offer this, and if I'm off base, committee members, please let me know. There are other instances like that in this policy where it's disjointed and incongruent, or we're asking for 2 different things at the same time, like the review it annually, review it once every 3 years. So I think it would be the best use of time if the authors of the policy, if we postponed this and you took a close review of the policy to make sure that where it is currently disjointed, that those were remedied before it came back to the policy. If not, realistically, we'll probably be here until 8 o'clock making the sausage on this policy, which I yield to the will of the committee. If that is what the committee would like to do, I'm here for it.
I would just like to know where else is that felt redundant. That's what I would like to know, because I didn't when I read it for the first time. Again, I felt like I understood what we were trying to move towards. If the board or if the committee wants us to make changes, I would like to hear from the committee on this policy as pertains to what changes you would like to see.
So here's kind of the catch-22. If I go through all of my list of changes that need to be made, then that's a yes, let's sit here and make the sausage on this policy. This is one example of the request for an annual review while also requesting a triennial review. Another issue off the top of my list is that we discovered that the site coordinator and the shack representative are in fact the same person, but the person is introduced before the position is explained. So that happens at the beginning of the policy, and then we don't explain what that is until the end of the policy. So instances like that kind of pop up throughout. And so again, I just want to hear from committee members. I'm fine with walking through page by page and we can kind of handle those things. Or if the committee would like to send this policy back to the authors of this policy to see if they would like to take another stab at streamlining it before it comes to us for review. I just would like a pulse check on what your pleasure is. Board Member Schneider?
I think it would be the best use of our time to send this back to the committee for their review again and to correct those inconsistencies.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Anderson? It's off.
Yeah, there it goes. No, I'm fine with sending it back to the authors to kind of fix those disjointed parts.
Okay, thank you. So what we will do, and we can schedule something, I will offer my time if you want to go through my specific notes and we can kind of walk through. We can schedule, bless you, we can schedule time to do that before it comes back to the committee, not for a crafting, but just for a review. So is there a motion to postpone policy? Well, let me pause and ask this. Is it realistic that that work will happen before our February meeting? And that would be Wednesday, February 1st.
Yes, that's possible, February 1st.
Okay,
I have to meet with the committee. We'll go through it again.
okay. So is there a motion to postpone policy 761 until our February 1st policy meeting?
So moved.
Second?
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. So that brings us to, the originally listed policy was policy 362, Rule 1. But again, we like to look at policies in clusters to make sure if we make a change to one, that we are consistent throughout. So we're going to begin with policy 362 and then shift to 362 Rule 1, and then we'll follow that up with 362.1 and 362.2. All right. Give me a second. Let me pull that up, please. All right, Board Member Schneider, we will start with policy 362. It's just one page. Do you have any proposed edits?
I do not.
All right. Board Member Anderson, same question.
I do not.
All right. I just have two questions. The first, and my apologies because I feel like I should know this, I just want to confirm, does BLA have a library?
I am Brandy Grady. I'm the Library Media Instructional Coordinator for the district. And the BLA does not have a library in the sense of having a staff library. There is a book collection, and I do go in and oversee it. So they have a collection, but not a staffed library.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to read second sentence of policy 362. In accordance with state law, the board supports a program which makes a library and media facilities available in all school buildings and to all students K through 12. So unless I'm missing something, we are out of compliance with policy 362 because there's not a full library in at least one of our buildings. Is that accurate?
Yes, there is a book collection and some other materials in the building that one of the teachers checks out to them. It is not staffed by a library support person at all.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how that goes.
No judgment. This is just for clarification. Is having, okay, so in your professional opinion, is having a collection of books and materials the same thing as having a library?
Not fully, no.
Okay. So that would be a yes, that we are out of compliance with policy 362.
Unless our students could actually access library materials.
That's why it's kind of great. They do check, one of the teachers has kind of taken on helping students check books out. So they are able to check books out.
So if they can access materials from other libraries, I guess my thoughts go back to, our creativity around how can we make sure our kids have access to library information or library materials. And if that's happening, then I'm not sure why we would be out of compliance.
Well, because the policy states that which makes library and media facilities available in all school buildings. So that goes back to my initial question, is what is available at BLA? Does that constitute a library?
Well,
And the answer was no.
Well, hardcover stuff, maybe, yeah, no, that's no, because hardcover stuff is not all there. We got a compository of things. But if we were to allow our students to check out, I'm just food for thought. If our students were able to look at library materials and get library materials, then it'll be a yes, because we are electronic.
So that's why I just asked, is what we currently have in that building, is that a library? And I mean, we don't have to go back and forth, but that's why I asked the professional librarian, is that a library? And the response was no.
They do have access to our ebook collection that we have, and they do, the teacher does facilitate working with the high school to borrow materials if they want things we don't have. So they do have access in that sense.
Okay, so should we overlook the language in the policy that says in all school buildings? If it's available at a different building that you have access to?
Well, they have access to ebooks, as stated. I think it's also my responsibility to bring clarity to certain thoughts. So,
Please.
yeah, and that's why I believe it's very important that we note that if we can, our students can access our e-libraries. Now, within the school as a traditional library, of course, that's not there. That's what I am stating publicly as well.
Okay, I don't want to get hooked up on semantics. I just want to know, do we have a library at BLA or no?
Yes, our students can access ebooks. Yes, that's what I would be saying. So we wouldn't be in violation of policy.
So yes, we have a library at BLA.
Yes. Access through electronics.
In that sense, yes.
I get a little leery when we're talking about in the sense, and okay, thank you so much. So for the record, we do have a library at BLA.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. My other question with policy 362 is that the second set of language where it says the Board of Education is legally responsible for the purchase of all media selected for the use of various schools and responsible for final approval of all of any and all media. And so my question is, since that is a responsibility of the Board of Education per this policy, what is the mechanism for this to happen, and how often does that happen? So again, this policy says that the Board of Education is responsible for final approval of all media. And I don't see that as a regular cadence on our calendar. And part of the beauty of reviewing policy is that we let ourselves be vulnerable and we say, okay, according to our policy, this is the standard. Are we meeting it and are we not? And if we're not, we don't have to be defensive. We just got to make sure that we figure out a way to meet the mark. right? And so this says that the board approves all media. And so my question, and you may need to get back to me, that's okay, is what is the mechanism for that to happen?
I think that comes in through the board approving the selection policy and then purchases being made based on the selection policy. There's not a direct, like the board is not currently approving every single purchase. But it approves the policy that's used to make the purchases. Excuse me.
Okay. All right. Board members, any other questions, comments, edits? Last call for policy 362. All right. Again, we'll move on, and once we review all four, we can approve those and send them on as a set. Policy 362, Rule 1, Board Member Schneider, it's just a page and a little bit, so we'll just review that whole policy. Any edits from your end?
Under Roman numeral 7, in the second line, the word including is repeated.
Yep.
So delete one of those.
Perfect. Ms. Schroep, did you see exactly what Board Member Schneider was referring? Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you and your time. Ms. Schroep, did you see where including is listed twice and we just need to remove one of those? Yes. Okay, perfect.
And then under number 3A, it says in all schools, a list of books. I think that should be changed to a list of media
Okay,
to be offered or to be ordered shall be prepared by, because we're no longer just looking at books, it's now magazines and e-subscriptions and audiovisual and so on.
right. All right, any other changes?
Those are the two that I had.
All right, Board Member Anderson, same question.
I got nothing new to add.
Okay. So I'll start with that first page. Roman numeral 2, accuracy of factual information, is proposed that we omit that, and I'm just curious as to why. And let me just complete my thought, my apologies. So the recommendation is that we omit, okay, so let me back up. Educational material, educational media selected for the use of School District of Beloit shall be judged on the basis of the following criteria. And then for number 3, what it previously stated, or Roman numeral 2, forgive me, accuracy and factual information, which I value. And the proposed replacement exhibits a high degree of potential user appeal and interest. So why would we swap out appeal for accuracy and factual information?
When the committee that I worked with this summer to rewrite this, we looked at the policy as a whole, and we were looking not necessarily as this one replaces that one. It was as a whole, we were replacing the information. So let me look one here, just 1 second.
It's also that point that you're saying is down below. So it's Roman numeral 5.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I was trying to find.
And then for 3, is it kind of the same rationale, information, and presentation that is up to date? Of course, that's something that we want, but that has been scratched and the language has been adjusted.
That's also under Roman numeral 5.
Okay. And then in Roman numeral 5, it says, is up to date in information and presentation, incorporates accurate and authentic factual content from authoritative sources. Do we have an idea, like, that seems like vague language, and maybe it's just to me, but what are considered authoritative sources?
Sources that are reviewed by professionals in the field that are making it. So if it's a science book, it's written by a company that is supporting science.
Right. Would you be open to editing that to professionally reviewed sources to provide some additional clarity there? And are committee members okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just going to write a note. So Ms. Shope will change that to professionally reviewed sources. All right. Oh, and then my only other question was on the second page under 3. In all schools, a list of media to be ordered shall be prepared by the school. Is there a reason it went to more vague language? Because if everyone's responsible, no one's responsible is the way I look at it. And so is there a reason the librarian would not be tasked with creating that list, but, definitely from input of all of the people that are listed there?
Yes, because we do not have librarians in each building, and so the list
Oh.
is created by requests from teachers, students, administration, the support person that works in the library, and then I will review them before they get ordered.
Just to kind of, for your own background,
Please.
because her title doesn't say librarian in it, she is the licensed librarian for our entire district. And so that's how we function as an organization. So everything runs through that. And then when we have our library media specialists, or I forgot what they're called. Those are the ones that are in our schools that are overseeing throughout the day, but then they are reporting up through our librarian, which is Brandy, the instructional coordinator.
So would it make sense to say that it shall be prepared by the library media specialist? Is that?
Coordinator. Yeah, so it says, unless I'm reading it wrong, everyone, it says that book requests from schools will be reviewed by the library media instructional coordinator, which is our librarian, against the criteria described above before they are purchased.
Oh, hold on, I'm at number 3.
Oh, my-
No, you're fine.
That is that's the bottom of number 3.
Okay, I'm still at the top. I haven't gotten
gotcha.
there yet.
Okay.
In all schools, a list of media to be ordered shall be prepared, it says by the school. Does every school has a library media specialist? No. Okay, so who is the person closest to all things library that each building would have? I'm not comfortable, and if I'm overthinking it, committee members rein me in with saying the list is gonna be prepared by the school. Because I don't know who, if it's not prepared, I don't know who to ask about it.
It says the building library paraprofessional. Their title's actually changed since we wrote this summer, so.
Okay.
But that's the person that is, excuse me, that is doing the day-to-day checking out of the books in the library.
So would it be appropriate to whatever that new title, okay, so let me break this down. The building library paraprofessional, that is the old title. What is the current title?
It just changed.
Library and media.
What's the group to support?
We'll have to look it up and get back to you because it was a recent change.
Nope, that is perfectly fine. So whatever the title for that position is, does every building have one? And is it appropriate to say that they will take the lead in creating this list? And I love the way you expanded it with input from students, teachers, all of the entities and individuals that are listed.
Yes, and in practice, that's how it works. They collate the information into the list and then send it to me. So-
Okay, so are you all comfortable with, instead of saying the school is responsible, that the person who holds this position is responsible, and you'll get us the name? All right, Ms. Shope, could we put a pin there and don't let us forget that we need to plug that hole? Perfect. All right, I don't have anything else for Rule 1. And is it possible that we could get that title to put in there before we conclude, or is that something we need to follow up on?
I can look it up. when I
Okay,
get back.
perfect, perfect. So when you find it, just yell. And then, so that'll bring us to 362.1. Board Member Schneider, it's just a one-pager. Any edits?
Excuse me.
Yes,
Can I
please.
ask a question?
Absolutely.
Before we lose the librarian?
Yep.
So if this new title is going to be inserted in number 3, will that affect the title in number 4 as well? Where it
Can you
says
give me the exact spot? Probably. Can
the
you point
library
me to
media
the?
Instructional coordinator, is that still an accurate title?
Yes, that's my title. That one's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
So we're good with 4?
Yeah, it's
We
the-
just need to find the title to plug
Okay.
into 3. Okay. Thank you
you.
for stopping us and
Nope.
making
just
sure we.
Wanted to verify. Thank
Perfect.
you.
No problem. Board Member Schneider, 362.1, any edits?
Under lending libraries, the second bullet currently says lending libraries are not expected to process subject and keyword requests. Lending libraries will process promptly. Well, we need to clarify what it is, because at one point they're saying they're not going to do this, but then they're going to do it promptly.
I-
So I
Yeah.
would add the word specific media requests, so that they'll process a request for a specific material, not to do a search to find things.
Okay. Do you read us again that proposed language for the first bullet point under lending libraries?
No, this is the second bullet point. Lending libraries are not expected to process subject and keyword requests. Lending libraries will process specific media requests promptly.
Oh, see mine, that's under 1. Okay, so what language are you proposing?
Adding the word specific media requests.
Do you want anything removed?
No, I would leave in that they're not going to process subject and keyword requests.
Okay, so the lending libraries will process.
Specific media requests.
All right, Ms. Shope, did you get that? Yes. Perfect. Anything else?
That is it.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, same question.
I got nothing.
All right. So my only question, and forgive my ignorance in this subject matter, I got a little confused reading the policy because it seems like we're talking about lending from a public library and also lending from a school library, and it seems like the two are conflated. Am I understanding that correctly? So specifically, that second paragraph says, at this time, resource sharing is available through a courier service provided by the CISA, school district, and/or public library system, or via the United States Postal Service. So is this saying that a student could borrow something from potentially the Beloit Public Library, but they can do that at their school library?
Yes, we have, the schools each have a public library card, so we can borrow things from the public library.
So is it the school borrowing it on the student's behalf?
Yes.
Got it, okay. That clears that up. Okay, so we will move on to policy 362.2, which is a 2-pager. Board Member Schneider, any edits?
There are a couple spots throughout this policy where it states 5-day working day. So it duplicates it, so it should be a 5 working day advance written notice. And that shows up one time under the pre-K through 6th grade. In the full-length movie of a rating of G, no parental notification is required. If a full-length movie has a rating of PG, parents/guardians will receive a 5 working day advance written notice instead of a 5-day working notice.
Okay, it's under high school as well.
Correct.
So just for clarification and for Ms. Shope's benefit, you want it to state the following.
The parent or guardian will receive a 5 working day advance written notice.
Okay, so Ms. Shope, as it appears in the header for high school, 5 working day advance written notice, could we just be consistent with that language throughout the process, throughout the policy? Okay. Anything else, Board Member Schneider?
That is it.
Okay. Board Member Anderson, any edits for policy 362.2?
I do not.
Okay. I have a question. So digital media will not supplant literature or reading assignments. Could you just provide some context for that or kind of the rationale?
Are you at the bottom of that policy?
I'm at number 1 of policy 362.2. Digital media will not supplant literature or reading assignments.
Do you want me to kind of explain what I believe the logic is behind that when they wrote this policy?
Please.
So we want students to have as much opportunity as reading complex on-level text. And so we don't want to, only watch movies in a class. And so I believe the original authors of this were getting at that concept of, we always want to lead with literature. It doesn't mean that we can't use movie clips or different types of media, to support, but it shouldn't replace.
Okay. Perfect.
I agree to that statement too. When I read through this part of the policy, I was hoping that we would say something like this, and to me that kind of captures it in a nicer way. For me, I would want it to read, we will not be using digital media to supplant like learning, period, you know what I mean? But
And I think to your point also, there's an additional piece, number 3, where it talks about a full-length movie or expert will not be shown without direct connection to course curriculum, right? So those two piggyback one another. We're not we're maximizing reading opportunities for kids, and also we're connecting things to curriculum.
Right.
So would it be fair to say then that digital media will not supplant printed literature on reading assignments? Just to make that clarification?
I'm okay with, are you okay with that, Dr. Garrison, or do you see that as, it's times have changed so much in relevancy and what we think about as literacy. And so that's a little bit of a gray area, right? This is 2005 that this was drafted, and post-COVID, there's a different mindset.
so when you say printed, yes, you can get online, you can find literature. No, it's not printed, it's through media. So I would probably stray away from saying printed from that perspective, because we don't have a lot of print material like that through just books and stuff that we're ordering, or I don't know. So the printed piece it gets like a catch-22 for me.
Yeah, but digital media could include, a book on tape or a recorded book or whatever. So just how do we then differentiate between those two? Because if we're saying digital media is not going to supplant literature, well, it's literature just presented digitally. So it can be the same thing. So how do we separate that idea?
Kind of goes back to that, like ebooks as we have now in our collections didn't exist when this policy was written. So I think that digital word meaning has changed over time. So I'm not sure what the.
I actually think the second sentence answers it for us in a way.
So are we okay with it as it reads, or is there a?
I'm okay because I think I understand the nuance of it. I know we like to read policy that's straightforward, but I think if all of us read this and we didn't have a conversation prior to this and we're all on the same page, that it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. Board Member Schneider, are
That's
you
fine.
good?
Yep.
Okay. All right, now I feel like the Grinch that stole Christmas, but I'm going to say it. Number 4. Sometimes I am, Dr. Garrison, it's okay. Teachers shall not use digital media for the purpose of rewarding student behavior, having entertainment as its primary value. Now, there's no judgment attached to this. As a parent, I know that this has happened in buildings, and I support it within reason. For example, right before a break, if you have students that have done all their work, they don't need to do catch up, etc. I won't out any buildings, but they had like a movie day or they had like a movie period. and I'm okay with that, but according to this policy, that is a violation. So I just want to hear from the administration kind of the intent of that number 4, and is it okay to adjust or omit that as my child looks on with a sad face?
So let me just say, that's a high no in my so you're not the Grinch, but I'm gonna have to kindly agree with this statement. Teachers shall not use digital media for purpose of rewarding student behavior, having entertainment as its primary value. I think that's where for me, to be honest with you, we have a lot of student achievement that we need to be getting at, and all time should be, and I believe that we should be using our times to move forward with student achievement. And I'm gonna rest there, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Morte.
I can put my mom hat on and I can put my educator hat on. And I will say, Dr. Garrison, I do fall more in alignment to you. I understand, Ms. Levy, where you're coming from as well. I reflected on this because I do know people use this for incentives. It's unfortunate, though, if we are thinking about academic achievement and then we happen to go through buildings and we know people have been on the same movie for 2-3 days in a row, right? And then it isn't defined here how we're using this as an incentive. And so there's that piece. The other thing is I think about my child who's 12, and he doesn't really watch a full-length movie. He watches YouTube. And so having kids watch and sit down for a full, hour and a half, 2-hour movie, is that even at this point in time what they're interested? Now, he's one 12-year-old, so he could be very different than all of the other 12-year-olds. But I just don't know, walking into a building and seeing someone play Charlie Brown Christmas, are we still living in the world of Charlie Brown Christmas, or can we move on from that? And so I'm gonna stay in alignment to this, just to say, I do like how it says movies shall not be used as a filler, right? And if we want to promote good behavior, this is an opportunity to do wellness, activities, fitness, games, things that are interactive. So I would stick with what we have here.
Okay. Does it make sense from the administrative lens? Because I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. I wouldn't be surprised if this is happening in all of our buildings at some point throughout the year. And I always want us to adhere to policy, and I don't want the policy to be out of step to the practice of what is happening in buildings. Does it make sense to take a beat and reach out to building leadership and say, hey, what happens in your building? And then compare and contrast that to what do you believe should be happening? To your point, what is most in line with what we want to see with fitness and activity and rewarding that student achievement, but is not the thing that is currently happening? And then once you get that feedback, that's what goes into the policy. So instead of saying what should not happen, that we're putting what we want to see happening. Does that make sense?
So I agree with you. I mean, we should definitely take a poll of kind of what's actually happening in buildings.
Number 4.
Number 4. But it also says in number 5 that how can I say it? If you look through number 5, it talks about like what should be happening as well, from showing the movie and thinking about copyright and thinking about does it align with your syllabus. And so if we are going to be using a movie, it should still be aligned to student achievement. So, with that being said, I do think we should poll our buildings to see kind of what's happening around our movies that we're showing. I agree with you on that.
Okay. So Ms.
I don't know if that changes the policy, though. I mean,
So here is what I would like to say. Okay. We will probably ultimately arrive at number 4 as number 4, but I'm saying number 4 is not being correct. So in addition to stating number 4 about what we don't want to see happen, I think it would be helpful to kind of, and not, we don't have to go crazy with it, but outline expectations of, since number 4 is in place, here is the alternative, so you're not doing number 4. This is what these are the parameters of what we recommend you do. And it seems like that could be incorporated into number 5.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay. Ms. Shope, would you write a note to remind us of that and just make sure that that's in the minute so that we know to come back to that and address it at our February meeting?
Do you think it should be 4B? Like 4?
It can be whatever you want to call it. I am open to that.
'Cause I would want to keep it with 4 because 5 lays out. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
All right. Last call for additions for 362.2. All right, and we'll circle back to that at our February 1st meeting. But the good news is we did all the heavy lifting, so it will be very brief. Before I open the floor for committee members for our last 2 policies, for me, and I am open if others feel differently, 871 is not a policy. It's an introduction to the rule, if that makes sense. It's like, and up next, policy 871, rule 1. There's not really substance, in my opinion, in 871. So does it make sense to just put what's in 871, rule 1, and that's policy 871? And I would definitely keep that kind of opening 2 lines and then roll right into rule 1. So 1, does that make sense? And 2, if yes, do you agree or disagree? Board Member Schneider.
That makes sense. I agree.
Okay. Board Member Anderson.
It does make sense, but was there a reason that what was the underlying reason that it was originally split into 2? That's my question.
So I think that's kind of an unfair question to ask. And the reason I say that is because it was last revised in 2019, which predates us, and it was initially done in 1988. So if someone in the room knows why, I would be impressed. But if you don't, you definitely shouldn't feel bad. Now with that introduction, oh, Ms. Shope, yes, ma'am.
My guesstimate would be that typically policy is like the statement, and the rule is the procedures, the how-to, the rules of play, like how things are going to be carried out. And that's typically how policy was done back in the day. And most of the time when it's been reviewed, it's been left that way, which is why some districts, policy is the policy number, and anything that is like rule 1, rule 2, that's what's considered the administrative regs, and they're separate. They're not in the same book, but here we have them in the same book.
And typically I agree with that. And you schooled me on this, which I'm appreciative. So for example, policy 123.1 versus policy 123 rule 1. So if it's explaining how to do policy 123, this is like my own personal pop quiz, it's a rule. If it's related but not necessarily instructive, you go to that point 1. How'd I do? Thank you. So I agree with that, and I'm a fan of consistency. But in this instance, and I yield to the will of the committee, like policy 871 doesn't tell me anything. In all of the other examples, it's like, oh, okay, that policy told me something, and then the rule explained the execution. This literally tells me nothing. And so Dr. Garrison, do you have a preference?
I personally thought when I looked at this that's the way y'all wanted it. Otherwise, no, I don't have any special thoughts to that. I thought that's the way y'all wanted it, so I was like, okay, that's nothing there. So I ran on ahead and went to 871, rule 1, and that's where the stuff is at. So I agree with your change. move it personally.
Okay, so unless there is a strong objection, which we will entertain, Ms. Shope, remind me again on the process of retiring a policy, because what I'm recommending is that we collapse all of the edits in 871 Rule 1 into policy 871, and we just keep those first 3 lines and then roll right into it. And then we would retire or propose the retiring of policy 871 Rule 1. Is that accurate?
It is. So what I would do for the committee is take everything that's in 871 Rule 1 minus the red strikeout, and I would move it into 871 as proposed new language for 871. And then to the, to the board, we would propose from the committee that 871 Rule 1 be deleted, omitted, retired.
But retire, because we never delete policy.
Right.
So yeah,
So
so
it
we
would be
would retire 871 Rule 1.
Yes.
All right.
So in the last 2 pages where all that red is, like for the teacher, for the principal, for the superintendent, that's all being proposed to be deleted out of that policy. I would not put that in 871 because it's not in 871 to begin with, and it's being proposed to be removed from the rule. So I wouldn't even propose that into 871.
Correct. And then just to make sure we're all on the same page, the only thing that would remain in 871 as it currently reads are those first 3 lines. So the second portion, the 4 lines, that would be deleted as well, because it's basically like, here comes Rule 1, when you're actually going to have Rule 1 there. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to repeat it in case couldn't tell. So what you're saying is we keep the first paragraph and we delete the second paragraph, and then we go right into Rule 1 by moving everything over.
Yes, ma'am. Does that work for everyone? Okay.
We don't need the second part.
Okay.
That's what you said the first time.
All right.
I understood, sorry.
No, you are perfectly fine. Okay, so because we are going to hold off on 871 to get that feedback from buildings, just to make sure that our policy is as relevant as possible, either going to add to 4 or 5. I yield to the recommendation of admin on that, and we approve policy as a set. If there are any edits, we can discuss that now. For 871 Rule 1, we'll take it 1 page at a time, but we'll wait until February and approve both of those together to go to the full board. Board Member Schneider, it's a little over 3. Do you have any edits on that one? You can just walk us through.
The only I had was under number 15F. The last sentence, the committee chair may choose. It's just a misspelling of the word there.
Okay, thank you so much for catching that. Ms. Shope, did you get that? 15F?
15?
F as in Frank? And just we're on 871 Rule 1, 15F.
Yep.
Board Member Anderson, same question.
I do not have any edits.
Okay, and I just have a quick question on number 17. Decisions on reconsideration materials will stand for 5 years before new requests for reconsideration of those items will be entertained. Is there like a state statute or some overarching opinion that governs that?
That was just the recommendation we used. The American Library Association recommendations as a model for a lot of this, that when we wrote it, and that their recommendation is that it stands for 5 years so that you're not reviewing the same book every year.
Okay. And do you remember offhand what the name of that document is? Because I think that wherever those standards are housed, that may be a good thing to cross-reference at the end of the policy.
Yes, it's the, I can pull it up.
Oh, please.
And while she's doing that, the name of that position is Library Media Support.
Okay. Ms. Shope, could you go back to that? And then instead of where it says will be the responsibility of the school, okay, I just pulled it up. So in all schools, so this is policy 362, rule 1, and this is at the top of number 3. So instead of shall be prepared by the schools, give that to us one more time.
By the Library Media Support, do you want to say person? So we know that when we say the word support, we mean that we're talking about a person. Library Media Support.
Perfect. Ms. Shope, did you get that? Yes. Perfect, thank you.
So if I could clarify that sentence, it will read, in all schools, a list of media to be ordered shall be prepared by the library media support person with input from students, teachers, and administrators.
Perfect.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
thank you. And then while we're waiting for where those guidelines are housed, so we can include that as a cross-reference for what will be added to policy 871. Make sure I have this right. So we're going to hold that 362 set because we have some edits, but that should be a really quick go through. My apologies. Let me start at the beginning, Amy. So policy 80, and Ms. Shope, correct me if I get any of this wrong. Policy 811 and 811.1 have been approved to move on to the full board for first reading. Policy 761 is going to come back to this committee February 1st. The 362 policy set, which includes 362, 362 Rule 1, 362.1, and 362.2. All of those are going to come back just in case there's some final tweaks and edits, but we're going to focus in on what originally came to us, policy 362, Rule 1, and then the edit that we're specifically going to, the administration is going to reach out to buildings to incorporate practice, which is 362.2. And then we just need to cross-reference what will now be included in 871, and we should be good. Is there anything that I'm missing, committee members? Okay, thank you.
Point of clarification.
Please, ma'am.
362, as far as I heard this evening, did not have any revisions, correct? There were only revisions on the other three.
Let me double check. Yes, that's accurate.
Okay.
So that
And
one
you-
won't need to go to the full, but we want to have it on the agenda just to keep everything together.
Yep.
But just note, the only thing that'll need to go to the full board for a reading is 362 Rule 1, 362.1, and 362.2.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I gotta ask clarification.
No, you're fine.
362.1, what, was there, did I miss a clarification? Did I miss that? Was there something that needed to be added to this? 362.1?
We made edits, so anytime we make edits, it needs to go to the full board for approval.
Okay, I must have stepped out. when it-
No, you're fine.
My apologies on that. I didn't write nothing on this page.
When we include the edits, is it okay if we go back to the cross-reference? It's from the National Library Association, those guidelines.
Are we
She wants to
talking
find the,
71?
yeah, she wants to find the exact name of the document that they looked off of, and so she's got to look through some of the resources.
No, that is perfectly
Okay.
fine. Ms. Shope, could you just make a note? We'll go ahead and look at 871 and 871 Rule 1 again at the February 1st meeting, but it's just to make sure that we have that cross-reference. And actually, it'll be combined, so it's just going to be policy 871. Oh, perfect.
So, Ms. Chope, would you like me to share the link with you? Would that be the best way to do it? Because there's a reconsideration and there's a whole bunch of information about recommendations and things, and then there's like some sample policies, and it's all in one place, on one page. Let's do that, okay.
That would be wonderful.
So we can cite it correctly. It's through the American Library Association, ALA, and the title of the doc is Reconsideration, Selection and Reconsideration of Policy Toolkit for Public School and Academic Libraries.
And then it's split into the libraries, they're separate, like schools separate.
So if we just put that title as the cross-reference, are we able to link in board docs, so we'll have it like hyperlinked? Perfect. So if we just need to list the title, and then if you send the link, we can get that hyperlinked.
Okay, do you want to hear the title one more time?
Sorry.
Yes, I need the title one more time.
Okay. Selection and Reconsideration Policy. Toolkit for Public, School, and Academic Libraries.
Thank you.
All right. So if there are no further edits to policy 871, is there a motion to approve policy 871 as amended, to move on to the full board for first reading, and to retire policy 871 Rule 1? To move that to the full board for approval.
So moved.
Second?
Right, there is a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Point of clarification.
Yes, please.
I would like to just clarify that your motion was to recommend to move to the full board approval of the revisions and layover of policy 871 with the inclusion of the language from 871 Rule 1.
Well,
And
I just
then-
said, like, as amended,
Okay.
and we know to include that. And then also to move on to the full board, the recommendation to retire policy 871 Rule 1.
Perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
no problem. All right, I forgot where we were in the process. I believe there was a motion and a second. Jump in if there wasn't. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to meeting closing. Our next meeting date will be Wednesday, February 1st, 2023 at 5:30. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I am assuming there is no discussion. Jump in if I am incorrect. If not, all in favor, aye.
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 All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.